The Beatles were still on a curve. You know, they started from a fairly low state, and they were rising rapidly and most dramatically. Eventually, that curve flattened out, and they became tired of their way of life. But now, in 1964, they were still rising, and they never disappointed me with what they were giving me. I was quite demanding on them, because I wanted a new single every 3 months. I wanted a new album every 6 months. And so I was always pressurizing them. And the great thing about the Beatles was they never gave me the same thing twice. They never gave me Star Wars 2 or Star Wars 3. They gave me a new song with a new concept. And each one seemed to be better than the one before. I should have known better. Yeah, this one definitely is in the original mold. The trademark of the nice rhythm plus harmonica, blues harmonica of John, was something which established us in the first place with Love Me Do, Please Please Me, and I love that sound, love the combinations of that. And of course with this song, I Should Have Known Better, it did work very well. It was harking back to where the Beatles started. This was their basic pop song, and I think that was the one that they needed in A Hard Day's Night. I'm Happy Just to Dance With You wasn't one of their better songs. I think that it was a bit of a pop boiler. There are a lot of people who swear by it, not I. And I think they could have done better, and they did in other songs. Tell Me Why was a better song. Again, not terribly, I mean, they were still developing their craft. They hadn't yet got to the heights of Strawberry Fields or Penny Lane, and they were still honing their art. And Tell Me Why is a good song. Not one of their greatest, though. And Our Lover wasn't written for the film. It was one of Paul's first attempts at writing a love song, really. And it was a soft song. It was everything that John couldn't write and didn't want to write. And John always sort of attacked Paul for his soft underbelly, which was his capability to move people like this. And it was a very gentle and almost conventional song. But in Paul's hands, it reminded me very much of one of the numbers that he did on his audition, which was Till There Was You, which he also recorded. It had that soft and gentle accompaniment. And of course, it was a very good foil for the film. We needed songs like that. We didn't want to have everything up-tempo, everything bashing our heads off. And it was a great one. It's still one of the best songs he's written. John had a different way of writing from Paul, of course. They were kind of the opposite sides of the same coin. But it didn't matter. They both wrote brilliant stuff independently. Sometimes they collaborated. And If I Fell was an example of John in his quieter moods and his reflective moods. But it goes along still with a nice rhythm. It isn't a dreary song by any means. It's got a nice pace to its own. Well, in the early days of recording the Beatles, my job was to parcel the thing up, make it tidy, and tell the boys how long it had to be and where we would put the song, how many times we would do it, where we would have a solo, how the beginning should start, and how to make a finish. So I would think about all this, and in the case of Can't Buy Me Love, I didn't like the idea of going straight in as Paul did. I said, you know, you've got a good hook here. Can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so. I said, let's use that and make that as an introduction. So Paul said, well, how do you do that? I said, well, okay, let's think about it. And I put together, Can't Buy Me Love. I said, let's repeat that. Love, love, love. And that makes a beginning. That gives us a nice, people want now to hear more. So that's exactly what we did. And the other thing about Can't Buy Me Love is that not many people realize it. It is a 12-bar blues. The actual construction of it is a 12-bar blues. And they're the easiest ones to get over to people. They seem to be received so well. And it's a song that can be done by almost anybody, again. It's a great song. I did it later on with a great singer, Ella Fitzgerald, my dear Whopper, as John said. And she did a terrific version in Abbey Road Studios again, with a score by Johnny Spence, who used to do all my work with Matt Monro. And that's one of my favourite recordings. A shuffle rhythm on All My Loving, and uncharacteristic, really. I mean, it was almost, again, I think this is almost old-fashioned in a way, but with the Beatles doing it, it wasn't. It was, I think, very typical of their early work. And Dick Lester loved it. He thought it should be, very much would be a part of the film. So it went in. I remember talking to some mums and dads who didn't like Beatles. You know, they didn't like the rough mop tops and the raucousness and all that kind of thing. Looking at it today, it's amazing, isn't it? But they thought they were rather wild. And they couldn't hear the music for the noise. So if they got a song like All My Loving or something, they wouldn't even start to listen to it. We had to convert them. We had to make them aware that this music was great. And one of the ways of doing that in the film was to underscore with the tunes as well as the songs. Well, I think the whole thing about Ringo was that we always like to have a Ringo track on an album to include him in the family, so to speak. But we all recognise that Ringo didn't have the greatest voice in the world, or they had a great personality, and his range wasn't exactly great. So he had to have really a song which didn't have more than about 5 or 6 notes in it. You know, I'm being very practical here. I Want to Be Your Man was ideal for that. It was a repetitive little lick, you know. Da 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 da. It was a kind of almost a child's chant, and suited Ringo down to the ground, and he did it very well. George in the early days was very ambitious to be like John and Paul, but of course John and Paul kicked each other off. They had a rivalry which George didn't share, and only too obviously they were better songwriters than George. So Paul or George had to struggle. He didn't work as fast as they did either. He used to, when he wrote a song, he would take a while and he would sort of work at it and hone it to get it right. Don't Bother Me was the first of his kind. I'm afraid I didn't encourage George too much, and I always regret this. I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry, George. I should have encouraged you more. But as he later on, of course, he developed into a great songwriter. And Something is one of the best love songs ever written. She Loves You. She Loves You was their third hit, their fourth record, their third big hit, third #1. And again, they hadn't disappointed me. It was completely different from what went before, which was From Me to You. And I do remember when they first played it to me, I loved it. But when they ended the phrase on a sixth, as they do, in the harmonies, it was a bit like Glenn Miller. And I said, I wonder if they're doing the right thing here. Isn't this a bit unhip, laddies? They looked at me as I was mad. And Paul said, it's great. It's great. I said, I've heard it so many times before. He said, we haven't, and nobody else our age has either. So they stuck with it. And even today, I was with Paul last weekend, and he said, it's got a sixth in it, like She Loves You, remember? He still remembers that criticism. But it's a super song, and it cracks along like wildfire. This Boy was a very softy kind of song for the Beatles. And in the original track, of course, we know it featured their very close harmonies. And it was a strange one to choose, but we needed a mood piece. Ringo going off by himself, slightly melancholy, going along the towpath and not very sure what's going to happen. And I think it was Dick who suggested using This Boy as the theme for it. And I just scored it for orchestra and used an electric guitar, rather like the James Bond guitar. In fact, we had Vic Fleck playing it, who played the original James Bond, very low down. And seemed to work okay. The title song was an example of instant combustion. And I mean, it all came about. Ringo would always come up with a silly phrase from time, not silly, but quite witty phrase from time to time. And he actually did say, "Oh, I'm so tired. It's been a real hard day's night." And that became the title of the song. Later on, he had something like, "We're working 8 days a week," and that became a song. You know, he always has these, "Tomorrow Never Knows." These are examples of Ringo's titles. And when everybody said, "Yeah, it'd be great, let's write a song about it," John and Paul swung onto overdrive, and they did it within one day. I think it was largely John, and with Paul adding a little touch here. And when he brought it into the studio, literally hot off the press, I said, "Well, if this is going to be the opening music of the film, we've got to start with something fairly sensational. It's got to attract everybody's attention." So John said, "What do you reckon then?" I said, "How about one single chord that's going to knock people's socks off?" And so he got out of his guitar and he started playing around. He went, "No, that's not it, that's not it." And it was a bit like Shinolta Drandy, you know, the guy who found the lost chord. Suddenly he did this twang. I said, "That's it, great, we'll stick that on the front." And you know, to this day, I still don't know what that chord was, but it's a very good one. And it sort of set the whole tone for the song and for the whole film, because we knew that what was going to follow was going to be dramatic, wonderful, funny, exciting, and everything else.